very distinguished speaker of today's plenary lecture, Honorable Chairs, Dr. Gautam and Dr. Bansal, distinguished delegates. It's my pleasure to welcome our distinguished plenary speaker of this 15th Agriculture Science Congress at Varanasi. Our distinguished speaker is Dr. Shekhar C. Mande. He is the Director General, Center Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, and Secretary, Department of Scientific and Industrial Research. Prior to this, Dr. Shekhar was Director of National Center for Cell Sciences. He has served various advisory committees, panels, task forces for Government of India to shape the science, innovation, and technology in India and abroad. He has a very illustrious career, and he was awarded various awards during his career. He received the Santi Sarup Bhatnagar Award. He is fellow of major scientific academies. This is a testimony of his distinguished and outstanding research contribution to the science and technology. He has a fellowship of Indian's National Science Academy, National Academy of Science, Indian Academy of Science. He will be delivering a talk on technologies and innovations for meeting energy challenges in India in agriculture and energy sector. Sir, on behalf of all the delegates and the organizers of Agriculture Science Congress, we would welcome you, and we are very eagerly looking forward to hear your lecture. This session will be chaired by Dr. Gautam and Dr. K.C. Bansal. Dr. Gautam was chairperson of Protection of Plant Varieties and Farmers' Rights Authority, Government of India. He was also chairperson of National Biodiversity Authority, the Ministry of Environment, Government of India. He was Vice Chancellor of Govind Vallabh Pant, University of Agriculture and Technology. He's basically a plant breeder and awarded various and very distinguished awards, Harbhajan Singh Memorial Award and Lifetime Achievement Award by the Canadian International Development Agency. He's fellow of National Academy of Agriculture Sciences, and he was also Vice President of National Academy of Agriculture Sciences. We have our co-chair, Dr. K.C. Bansal. He is presently Secretary, National Academy of Agriculture Sciences. He was, and also he is a senior advisor with Alliance Biodiversity International, CET Asia, a senior fellow and area convener of the Nano Biotechnology Center, the Energy and Resources Institute. He was director of National Bureau of Plant Genetic Resources, and a very distinguished leader at global and national level on molecular biology and biodiversity. So all of us are very eagerly waiting to hear Dr. Mande, and I will hand over to Dr. P.L. Gautam and K.C. Bansal to kindly conduct this session. Over to you, Dr. Gautam and Dr. Bansal.
Thank you, Dr. Joshi, for the... Okay. Am I audible? Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You are audible.
Thank you, Dr. Joshi, for the setting the stage for the very important session. You gave very brief but very candid information about the speaker of the session. And I have my co-chair with me, Dr. Bansal, who will be speaking once we listen to the plenary lecture. We feel honored to be the chair and co-chairs for this session. And we would like to first listen the lecture now, as you are most anxious to listen to him. So I request Dr. Mande to kindly deliver his plenary lecture. Dr. Mande.
Thank you, Professor Gautam. Thank you, Dr. Bansal. Thank you, Dr. Joshi, for the kind introduction. The President of the Academy, Dr. Tilochan Mahapatra, all the distinguished fellows of the Academy, friends who have gathered in this 15th session of the National Academy of Agricultural Sciences, friends and colleagues from BHU, it's a great pleasure and privilege for me to be able to be with you on this day. Only yesterday, I was congratulating the new Vice Chancellor of the Varanasi Hindu University, Professor Sudhir Jain, and I was recalling my fond association with BHU. Although I have not studied in BHU myself, both my parents have been alumni of BHU in the 1950s and 1960s. And as a very good Vice Chancellor, I mean, of course, I know Sudhir Jain for a long time. And as a very good Vice Chancellor, he not only thanked me, but immediately asked me to raise some money for BHU for chair professorships and so on and so forth. So that shows actually a good intent from the word go from Professor Jain. And I am very sure that the future of university is in very, very good hands with him being there. Thank you all once again for inviting me here. As it so happens, I'm working at the CSIR for the last 3 years. I'm the Director General of CSIR. And as an organization, CSIR is very fond of its long association with the agricultural community in the country. I mean, ICR essentially came into being in 1948 or 1949, around that time. But much before ICR formally came into being, there have been organizations which eventually merged with ICAR, which have existed for at least 50, 60 years before that. And I always am very fond of recalling the example of IVRI, for example, which had existed since the late 19th century and eventually became such an integral part of India's science and technology. It started as an imperial laboratory in Pune, moved to a number of places before settling down in Izzatnagar. But apart from that, CSI's association with the agriculture community has been very, very strong since independence. In fact, we are very proud that during the Green Revolution, when the agricultural scientists were making such great strides and contribution to the country, even CSIR participated its own way by trying to mechanize agriculture and rolling out some of the mechanical aspects of agriculture. For example, the first tractor was made in our laboratory in Durgapur, the Central Mechanical Engineering Research Laboratory, and eventually it spun out as Punjab Tractors Limited. So the Swaraj was made for the first time in CSI laboratories. Similarly, in the early days, the agri-pesticides were made in our laboratories in Hyderabad and Pune and so on and so forth. And the association with ICAR has continued for a very long time, and it continues even today. And what I would like to do is, in my talk, I would like to give a few examples of what we have been doing from our side, CSIR as an organization. And in the end, I would like to spend about 5 minutes on my last slide of what our aspirations should really be for the future. We as the people of the country, we as humanity, and we as scientists, what it actually would be. So what I would like to do now is share with you some of the achievements of CSIR, and if the host could allow me to enable my screening of the PowerPoint, that would be useful. Would the host be able to allow me to share my screen? Thank you very much. I hope you are able to see my slides now. So what I thought I will spend some time on both the sectors, agriculture and energy. And in the end, towards the end, I will try to actually intertwine the two, that how the two are so closely linked with each other. We don't have to go too far back in history. We all know that the principal propellant for human progress came because of the developments in energy about 150 to 200 years ago. And what is typically called as the Industrial Revolution 1.0 really because it became possible because of the energy sector. But agriculture has existed, the proper agriculture in terms of cultivation and domestication of cattle and all has existed for at least about 10 to 12,000 years since then, before that. But energy is the one which really brought revolution in all the practices, including agriculture. But today we are at a crossroad, and we realize that humanity really is at a crossroad of both these sectors. Both these sectors are key sectors in developing economies. Paradoxically, both these sectors are most vulnerable to the 21st century problems that have been talked about, and all of us are very fresh from the Glasgow summit and the negotiations that took place, including climate change, depletion of natural resources, and growing populations, and so on and so forth. And this would remain actually our challenges for the coming time. And at the last slide of my presentation, I will come back to this particular point, that what are the challenges ahead and how we should prepare ourselves for those challenges. But for time being, let me go back to some aspects of what CSIR's contributions have been before I come to that particular aspect. Some years ago, we were actually requested by the Honorable Prime Minister that is it possible that we support aroma industry in the country? I mean, because we have had some history in aromatic crops. For example, mentha, which India used to actually be a net importer till about 1960s. At that time, CSIR has two institutes, the Central Institute of Medicinal and Aromatic Plants in Lucknow, CMAP, and the Indian Institute of Integrative Medicine in Jammu. They decided that they would introduce some of the mentha crops in the country and then improve upon the varieties of those. And that has actually brought now to a situation today. We are net exporters, and in fact, today we are the largest producer of mentha in the country. Now, with this history in the mind, the Honorable Prime Minister requested us whether we can actually do something to help the aromatic industry in the country. And with that particular sentiment of the people, we decided working on very specific aromatic plants. Once again, we do take a lot of help from ICAR in this and the institutes of ICAR in all of this. And then we started promoting cultivation of things like lemongrass, vetiver, lavender, pamarosa, and so on and so forth. And in fact, it has brought enormous value in the last 3 or 4 years to the farmers in the country. And in fact, whenever I have visited myself, some of the remotest regions in the country where our laboratories have gone and installed distillation units and taught the farmers that even from arid or semi-arid lands, or the land which apparently quote unquote is not usable, how that land can be used for very value added crops such as this, actually what here. And some of the distillation plants have been installed in places which are not in motorable region. They are about 10 kilometers away from the closest motorable region. They were carried on the shoulders by people and gone there and installed there. And when I visited all the farmers of the region, I could not believe myself that how delighted they were with this kind of facilities available there, especially with the land which was not apparently quote unquote in use for agricultural produce. And some of those places were used for cultivating, for example, in Himachal Pradesh, wild marigold, and Jammu and Kashmir, lavender. The lavender itself has caught imagination of many people in recent times. And in fact, it has been talked about in now international media as what the international media has termed it as purple revolution that has unfolded. And 2 months ago, I had an opportunity to visit 2 districts in Jammu and Kashmir. One is Pulwama and one is Kupwara. Now, all the distinguished fellows of the Agriculture Academy here would agree with me that Pulwama and Kupwara, both these districts, are known for something else. Right? Whenever we hear of Pulwama, we always hear of a news that we don't want to hear. But with my own eyes, I could see fields full of lavender. And that convinced me that the winds of change are really here. And about 50 or 100 farmers who had gathered that day for my visit, all of them, a large majority of them women, were actually extraordinarily grateful for having brought a change like this in their lives. So what I want to say is that by simply diversifying some of the crops that can bring value to people can actually be very transformative in the lives of common people and common farmers. Now, the number is not very large, as you can see on the slide, but nonetheless, the change definitely is here. And the whole state of Jammu and Kashmir has now actually taken up this as one of their key points or a flagship programs for the future. Now, buoyed by the success of the Aroma mission that what we have carried out in the last 4 or 5 years, we now actually have become even more ambitious, and we have formed a multi-departmental partnership, a partnership with ICAR, partnership with KVIC, partnership with FFDC, APIDA, TriFed, and so on and so forth. Together, we have recently launched. So I had the pleasure and privilege of having DG ICAR with us on that particular day, Professor Tilochan Mahapatra. And together we launched the Floriculture and Honey Mission. Now, all of us know that honey has very good medicinal properties, but India's honey has some issues in being acceptable in overseas markets because of certain reasons, because maybe of the quality control or maybe something else. Similarly, floriculture is a market that is waiting to be tapped for several years. You know, I mean, there are many nations around the world, for example, Holland or Indonesia, a large contribution to their GDP comes out of floriculture. And once again, all the agencies shown on this slide, we thought together that why can't we also make some difference in this particular area, if we are possible in the next 4 or 5 years, if we are able to promote this and create end-to-end market chain, maybe there is an opportunity here for us to make some dent. And the program had just begun, but nonetheless, we actually see winds of change once again in some of these things. A large number of verticals have been decided in this particular mission. For example, we would be making quality planting materials in many labs of different agricultural universities. For example, SCOUST in Srinagar, SCOUST in Jammu, agricultural universities across the country, agricultural universities, ICAR labs, and CSIR labs. The quality planting material actually we will do and distribute them through the very wide networks of KVKs to the farmers in those regions. And if you are able to generate a cold chain for this and a marketplace for farmers to come and auction this, I think at least part of our objective would be made that some farmers would start benefiting by this kind of missions. So aroma and the floriculture missions are somewhat different than in the past. And we do believe that this would begin some sort of a mini kind of a change to bring value to common farmers in the country. We are also aware, being a premier science and technology organization in the country, of all the modern methods that we need to bring in practice. And one of them, we have actually tried them in multiple crops, but what I'm showing you here is cotton. As all of us know that even BT cotton has started becoming resistant to bollworms and all. And we decided that we'll also actually try to generate the next generation of cotton, and we have actually engineered TMA 12 gene in this with the Cry1 AC of BT cotton with hybridizer 2. And we do see that whatever resistance was there in the original cotton varieties, including the BT cotton, can be overcome with this. So now this is not resistant to the bollworm attacks and can be actually used. And we have just begun once again field trials in partnership with ICAR in Nagpur, the Cotton Research Institute of Nagpur. Similarly, what we have also recently done now, and this is not the GM, but this is the hybridized variety of rice. Some years ago, the IRRI in Hyderabad and CCMB in Hyderabad, CCMB is our laboratory, CSIR laboratory, together had actually generated this variety of Samba Masuri. And this particular one is actually now under cultivation in several lakhs of hectares across the country. But what recently these people have done is that not only this is now bacterial blight resistant, which was the original variety, but have also attempted by simple hybridization to bring the glycemic value of rice lower than what it is originally. So what we now find is that the new variety that has been done in collaboration with IRRI, the CCMB finds that this is actually a low glycemic index rice that can now be promoted for cultivation. And once again, we are trying to see whether this can be actually now promoted in the coming time. So far, it has been cultivated in about 3 lakh hectares in the farmers in the states of Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, and so on and so forth. But we do hope that it will actually scale up in the coming time. The third thing that CSIR had done, as an example, is bringing in the change and trying to realize the value from oceans. Now, those of you who have kept up with some of the recent announcements of the government would agree with me that the last couple of years you have seen that the government has declared an intent to realize value of the oceans through the Deep Ocean Mission and what is called as the blue economy worldwide. One such thing what we have done, and our laboratory in Bhavnagar, the Central Salt and Marine Chemical Research Institute, have been trying this experiment in the Mandapam district in Tamil Nadu, where they have been trying to promote cultivation of seaweed. And the cultivation of seaweed was then linked with a startup called Aqua Agri. And Aqua Agri has been making multiple products of the seaweed that is made in Kalpa. And I had a chance of presenting this in CSIR Society, this particular example with the videos, to the Honorable Prime Minister and Honorable Finance Minister. And when it was presented, it was realized that there is an enormous potential that lies ahead of us in practices such as this. And government, in fact, this year in the budget, therefore, has announced a seaweed mission that some of the laboratories of ICAR are also involved in trying to propagate this one. And in fact, Tamil Nadu would be one of the first states which will try the experiment of scaling this experiment up. Apart from this, we have also been trying for introducing some of the non-traditional crops. And many of you would have heard of this particular example in literature. In fact, while literature, it also came on Kaun Barega Karupati as a question from Mr. Amitabh Bachchan. And this one was the introduction of Ferula asafoetida in the country. As many of us are aware, hing or asafoetida is an essential ingredient of Indian cooking, but nonetheless, almost all of it is imported. Our annual import is of the order of about 1,500 tons per year. And rough market value that we import is of the order of about 1,000 crores. Now, if all of you are aware, asafoetida grows in cold deserts of places like Afghanistan and so on and so forth. But similar geoclimatic regions exist in India, especially in Ladakh and in Lahaul and Spiti Valley. And we thought that perhaps we should try getting asafoetida variety to India and try its cultivation. And with the help of NBPGR, we brought some asafoetida varieties to India. They were quarantined for a few years as per the protocols of NBPGR. And then last year, we introduced them in the Lahaul and Spiti for the first time. And this year, after 1 year has passed by, thankfully, we see that the plants are growing pretty well. It's a cycle of about 5 years before we can start harvesting it. But we are very pleased that this has been introduced and it appears to be on the right track at this particular moment. Similarly, we could also propagate cultivation of saffron outside Kashmir, especially in areas such as Himachal Pradesh, in areas such as Northeast and so on and so forth. Similar experiment we also tried in cultivation of apple in the Northeast, and we have had some good success of this in that particular region. We are also trying cultivation of cannabis with high THC. And what we know that there are a lot of derivatives of cannabinoids which can be used for medicinal purposes, especially pain management in future. And we think if we are able to actually come up with this, this will be very, once again, transformative for all the people for this. So some of the clinical trials are also just beginning from the cannabis. There are regulatory hurdles in these ones, but the regulatory hurdles can be overcome for the future. Apart from the agricultural practices, we are also involved in some of the post-harvesting technologies. Our labs such as Institute of Himalayan Bioresource Technology in Palampur and the Central Food Technology Research Institute in Mysore, they have been typically involved in some of the post-harvesting technologies. And I will not go too much into this, but large number of post-harvesting technologies we have been able to bring in into the market. Towards the end of my talk, I will also come to one of the aspects that we all must sit together and brainstorm is about circular economy. And the circular economy essentially would also mean that how do we use the agri-waste that we produce very effectively? Can we valorize the agri-waste that what we use? And a few technologies that CSIR labs have developed are, for example, making value-added products from banana peels, from wheat bran, from fruit peel, from corn husk, and so on. So that is actually shown somewhere here. And we work very closely with startups and in some of the industries, what we actually transfer this particular know-how and allow them to use this. We believe that this can be effective alternative technologies to single-use plastics and so on and so forth. Circular economy, when I come towards the end of my talk once again, one of the very important aspects is that also of a large number of flowers that are typically offered to deities across the countries. And what we have been able to do is get hold of self-help women group in areas such as Shirdi Sai Baba temple, in places like Mata Vaishno Devi temple near Jammu, in Kashi Vishwanath temple, and so on and so forth. And very recently in Ayodhya, we trained a large number of Ayodhya jail inmates in attempting to make value-added products from the flowers that are offered to deities. Now, in terms of circular economy, this is an extremely important point because these flowers otherwise would be offered to the rivers and eventually they would lead to general pollution of the land and water bodies. But if you are able to derive value-added products such as colors, natural colors, or incense sticks and so on and so forth, we will be able to bring some value to use the waste more judiciously. And it's exactly what we have tried to do in this, that we have gathered self-help women group at Shirdi, at Ayodhya, at Mata Vaishno Devi temple and so on and so forth, and we have tried to do this. Now this complements all the efforts that are being done in multiple ICR laboratories and multiple agricultural universities. You know, I mean, basically what I'm trying to show you is that it's not something which is rocket science, something which is not very, very highly innovative in terms of innovation index, but yet something which is extremely useful to the society. And very often, we as scientists get mired in some sort of philosophies where we have to only do something which is very highly innovative. And we only look forward to sending rockets to Moon and Mars and so on and so forth, which of course is one of our aspirations. But nonetheless, we forget that we also have to bring value to the society. And that particular aspect cannot be more emphasized in a gathering of all the agricultural scientists in the country. In fact, all of you have done such wonderful work over the last 50 years to have made India what we are today. But nonetheless, we have to actually remember that also as a lesson for the future, there's something which is very useful to the society, need not necessarily be a rocket science, but yet very, very good and very useful, which will bring value to many, many people across the country. Let me go over to the energy sector very briefly. I will change the topic. And towards the end of my energy sector, I will actually try to integrate how agriculture also becomes an essential part of our energy sector, how intertwined it is. We all know that there is an attempt now that is being made to reduce our dependence on coal. You know, according to the 2015 Paris Agreement, India had committed that it would attempt to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels And we will actually move towards wind and solar energy. And we had set a very ambitious target of generation of 100 gigawatt of solar energy by then. Trying as alternate use than the fossil fuels, including coal. Although it's very, very ambitious, India has actually reduced the dependence on coal power by something like about more or less than 40%, which in fact, it's actually a very, very good achievement. And in fact, India is one of those countries which is well on track to meet the targets of the Paris Agreement. And we should be all very proud of that. But as alternatives of coal, we have been thinking of many different kinds of alternatives of that particular one. The clean fuel technologies, for example, green hydrogen, lithium-ion batteries, energy storage devices, solar and thermoelectric devices, renewable power through wind, biomass, photovoltaics, and so on and so forth. These are all possible alternatives to coal. And CSIR in general has been working on almost all these particular vectors, all these particular verticals. For example, we have just begun a center of excellence on scaling up lithium and battery production in Chennai. We have set up the center of excellence with the order that we would be actually making something like 1,000 batteries a day in this particular one, which is actually a pilot plant. And then if that can be scaled up further by the industries, and we have seen a very strong industry interest from very big industries in the country, some of the largest industries in the country, and very pleased that this particular pilot plant that we are setting up in Chennai, which should be operational next year, would bring in actually a lot of interest from even the biggest industries in the country. And we do believe, we do actually trust that government and private sector together can work in this particular area for bringing lithium-ion batteries as the next generation storage through the CSIR Center of Excellence that we have set up. Similarly, we are also trying to see whether we can bring in value from other energy sources, such as food, such as agricultural waste, and so on and so forth. The challenges in bringing other sectors are, for example, in providing agrivoltaics technologies would be the technology level itself, but also developing standards for agrivoltaic modules, for example, by preventing pseudo agrivoltaics that are deployed in the country. And this would require developing proper information network and modeling tools through field trials, which would be made available to individual businesses and government agencies who plan to design and operate some such facilities. And multiple CSIR laboratories have been involved in some of these aspects in particular one. In collaboration with NTPC, we are also trying to see whether we can phase out traditional solid biomass for cooking and provide people in rural areas for solutions which are energy efficient and which also are de-risking the deforestation in the country. One such thing that actually needs to be deliberated is the effective use of residual biomass for producing energy. And as I was saying sometime earlier, the agri-waste, if it can be used effectively in these areas, perhaps some of the residual biomass that comes, for example, from stubble burning, can now be used effectively for producing energy for the future. And this also would then help us reducing impact on the environment. One very, very important component of this is use of residual biomass or agri-waste in the generation of fuels such as biodiesel, biojet, ethanol, and so on and so forth. And I'll show you an example in the next couple of slides on what we have done in this particular aspect. And unlike the myth that are perpetrated in common society, that is only Jatropha that can be used for generation of this thing, there are many other agri products that can be used for this. And in fact, Ministry of Agriculture and CSIR together had done a brainstorming last year on what different agricultural products in different geoclimatic regions in the country can be used for the generation of biodiesel, biojet, and so on and so forth. For example, the tree-borne oils, animal fats and fish oil, sugarcane, sweet sorghum, tapioca, and also the biowaste such as cow dung and chicken litter and so on and so forth. All of it can eventually go on replacing the traditional fossil fuel based things like diesel, gasoline, CNG, PNG, and so on and so forth. And this would require a very close collaboration with the agricultural ministries, the science and technology ministries, and the social sector, such as self-help groups, and so on and so forth. And I do see a very good opportunity for India in the coming time for this particular region. I would just like to spend a couple of minutes on the biojet fuel that what we have tried. Although most of it was Jatropha based in the initial time, we developed this biojet fuel and blended that at about 25%. And we had shown about 2-3 years ago that we could run a successful flight from Dehradun to Delhi. The SpiceJet flight that flew from Dehradun to Delhi about 3 years ago was run on a blended biojet fuel. But the issues always come in the blended fuel, or even if it is not blended and a completely biojet fuel, whether it can withstand the height and temperature that we typically have. And to demonstrate that, in January last year, we demonstrated that on one of the AN-32 aircrafts, the transport aircraft of Indian Air Force, in flying the biojet on both the engines of the AN-32, and we flew that particular aircraft to Ladakh, just to demonstrate that the biojet fuel that we generate is no inferior in quality than the traditional fossil-derived fuel. So in a sense, there's a huge opportunity to convert the agri-waste into biojet fuel, such as this, in this case, aviation fuel. And we also showed that in the Republic Day parade last year, that we can actually fly aircraft using this particular product. So what I mean to say is that some of the agri-waste can be indeed used, and not only Jatropha, for converting this into the biojet fuel. The catalysts that we have made in our labs are the only catalysts which work at room temperature in the world. And they also separate standing biojet from the water wash and so on and so forth. But currently, our vision is to make 200 liter a day biodiesel plant distributed across country, because we don't want to have centralized solutions of this. In fact, it can also be done on small farms or village level, and set up something like 50,000 units across country. If we do that, they would be comparable to one petroleum refinery diesel unit. What I mean to say is that all the agri-waste that is generated across the country, if it can be converted on the spot without the need for transport of all the waste to central refineries and converted into the fuel, the jet fuel or whatever, biodiesel, and the biodiesel, whatever is generated, can be then transported to the new places. It has the potential of bringing enormous value to the common people and the common farmers. And in that sense, the farmers then also will not see the need to burn away their crops and rather valorize the waste what they get to do. I am on my last slide now. I had been saying since beginning that I would like to spend about 5 minutes on this particular slide. Now, the assembly of the 15th Agricultural Sciences Congress is by far the most distinguished assembly of the agricultural scientists in the country. And we have many different things to contemplate for the future of the country, for the future of humanity in general. What I would like to urge all the people who are assembled here is actually try to think about the sustainable practice of the future. I'm positive that this thinking has already begun, but nonetheless, it requires an integrated thinking amongst not only the agricultural scientists, but also other S&T diaspora in the country, and also people who work at the grassroots levels and the government for the regulatory framework. All of us together need to put our brains together and try to make sure that our future is secure through sustainable practices that what we follow. That might require diversification of agricultural products in different parts of the country. the current product cycle that what we use, cropping cycle, are they really optimal? Or to make it more sustainable, can we think of better cropping cycles and better diversification of agricultural products in different parts of the country? That's one issue that all of us need to think collectively. And in fact, if all of us can do that, we can even generate a white paper for region-specific diversification of agricultural products and cropping cycles across the country. If the Agricultural Academy can do this, I think it will be enormously beneficial to the country and can be transformative for the coming 50 years. One of the major problems or challenges that we are facing for the future is the use of water. What you see in the graph is the availability of water per capita over a period of time. As you see, in the 1950s and 1960s, a large amount of water was available per capita. But by the time we came in 1990s, we became in general a water-stressed country. About 20 years ago, we made a transition to water-stressed country. And it's only a matter of another 20 or 30 years where we would become a water-scarce country. We are fast moving towards water-scarce country. And one principal contributor to becoming a water-scarce country is because rampant use of groundwater in much of our agricultural practices. Are these sustainable? That's the question that we all need to ask ourselves. And if not, can diversification of agricultural crop in trying to use water use in agricultural practices, can we come up with specific solutions? There are, of course, even more elegant solutions that are available, for example, drip irrigation and all, that can also save water. But we have to be very, very wary of the future that we are making a very rapid transition from a water-stressed country to a water-scarce country. And we must do something today to prevent that catastrophe that is waiting to happen. Apart from the agricultural practices, we also must come up with sustainable practices for storage and post-processing practices. As a citizen of modern India, it's somewhat disappointing to see that our storage practices are such even today that a lot of food products actually get wasted. A lot of agricultural products are wasted simply because they're not stored well. As a country, which aspires to be a global leader in the coming 25 years and lead the world into that secure future, we cannot have storage practices which have been used for the last 100 years in the country. We must have storage and post-processing practices which are commensurate with the changing times. And that brings me also to the last point of circular economy. I give you one example, but there are many, many different kind of examples that can thought of circular economy. And we as scientists must think of all those and bring those into practice, even for everything that what we do. All of these things that I have talked of require use of modern technology and require a proper regulatory framework. And I would like to appeal to the Agricultural Academy for both these, how we actually adopt modern technology for bringing in sustainable practices, and whether we can propose together some good regulatory framework to the country to keep up with the times that what we are passing through. It's only then that we can secure our future. We are very proud of all the contributions of agricultural scientists post-independence that has made India what it is today. And we would like to make the future generations of Indians to be proud of our generation by adoption of both the modern technology and the appropriate regulatory framework. Thank you all very much for your very patient listening. I will stop here. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you, Dr. Mande, for a very, very illustrative presentation. I request Dr. Bansal to make his remarks. Then I will conclude the session.
Okay, thank you, Dr. P.L. Gautam. At the outset, I would like to express my own gratitude to Dr. Mande, the Honorable Director General of the CSIR and Secretary of the Department of Council of Industrial Research, Scientific and Industrial Research, and also accepting to actually implement what all he has mentioned. His talk has covered so many diverse topics, particularly with regard to improving agriculture with the environmental footprint to be reduced further in this era of climate change. We are so very thankful to you, Dr. Mande, for giving this innovative presentation today to the whole community of agricultural scientists and giving your, again, as we normally expect from the CSIR, some of the innovative technologies you've talked about. Friends, Dr. Mande very clearly mentioned about the historical perspective of and the key role which CSIR has also played. Many of us, you may not know about, the role the CSIR played, as he mentioned, even during Green Revolution, starting with the manufacturing of tractors in the CSI laboratories, and which I'm sure now again, when we're talking of mechanization with reducing labor requirement and availability, I think this could be further extended by CSIR labs, I'm sure, to the smaller land holdings and to the smallholder farmers, because they also need any such economical tools and technologies, for further mechanization of agriculture. And I'm very happy, and we would like to congratulate actually Dr. Mande and the team of CSIR under his dynamic leadership in the country, for bringing in purple and golden revolution. We normally talk of green revolution in this country. We know how important food is, but how important the economy is equally, we all know, as our Honorable Prime Minister talking about 5 trillion economy. And I'm sure CSIR has a big way, to contribute that. And we congratulate you, Dr. Mande, and your entire team for these revolutions you have brought in, to the benefit of the Indian masses and the country as a whole. And when you, of course, covered both agriculture and energy sector, when we talk of the challenges and the innovations, I would cover up some of the presentations and the messages you have very clearly mentioned about the role CSIR has played, in agriculture particularly. You mentioned about the contributions CSIR made in aroma and floriculture, to bring value to the common farmers in the country. And we are so very excited about that. You mentioned about BT cotton, the transgenic cotton, one of the, I would say, and probably Dr. Mande, you would know it or not, I don't know, and maybe others, the only single paper which has come out from India on BT cotton, comprehensively worked out by the Indian scientists themselves in the National Botanical Research Institute and other AS laboratories, is the only paper which came in Nature Biotechnology with our all indigenous efforts, in that. And very happy that this work is further being now extended to overcome the resistance being developed by this particular nasty pink bollworm. We know it, how important it is to develop, certain more advanced types of, transgenic cotton to overcome that kind of resistance. And I'm sure, again, CSIR labs under your dynamic leadership will take into the new technology of genome editing, which is also now coming. And we would like to take that kind of work further in collaboration with even ICR if required. And of course, sir, improved Samba Masuri rice, Dr. Mande talked about it, is again a very collaborative effort with ICR laboratories, and it has given dividends. And it was one of the first products to be developed through the molecular breeding, which was a technology to, actually speaking, accelerate the pace of breeding and save resources and time both. And very importantly, many of the countrymen or agriculture scientists may not realize the importance of exploring the oceans, as you mentioned. I think it's very important when we talk of seaweeds, not only seaweed as a source of biostimulant, which is so very important for increasing agricultural production. Even I think it has a great potential for addressing the issues of malnutrition in our country, because the kind of nutrition which you can obtain, from seaweed as a food or feed, could also be explored. I'm sure, we'll have those opportunities to collaborate with CSIR labs. And again, when we talk of exploring oceans, there is a kind of a mission which you mentioned about, which the government of India has initiated, seaweed mission. It's I think very important. And also, we would be happy to have some collaborative agricultural startups, actually speaking, from the National Academy of Agricultural Sciences point of view, or the ICR point of view, as our Honorable DG again, Dr. Mahapatra himself, only about a month ago, gave an excellent talk on innovative ideas of agricultural startups. And I think together, CSIR and ICR, I'm sure we have a long way to go about it. And actually speaking, we were so very excited to listen to you, Dr. Mande, when you talked about, we normally talk about staple food crops, cereals, oilseeds, pulses, etc. But I think traditional, non-traditional crops you mentioned are very, very important, again, for the country and for the livelihood security of our farmers. He is a wonderful example. I know I have been listening to Dr. Sanjay Kumar, the director from IHBT. Actually, he was my junior when we were doing PhD together in the same lab. And I know how NBPGR, where I had also an opportunity to serve along with Dr. P.L. Gautam. Both of us actually are speaking from NBPGR. And NBPGR has played a very big role in introducing some of those very important crops to the country. Hing is a wonderful burning example today when we're talking about it, to reduce imports and to extend areas of cultivation beyond Kashmir to Lahaul and Spiti. It's excellent way, and I'm sure we wish you all the best for you to have success more in this area of research. And not only this, and you mentioned about saffron, you mentioned about introduction of apple, and Dr. Gautam was instrumental because he's also chairing this session. I would tell you again to NBPGR, introduction of kiwi fruit in India. Actually speaking, some of our scientists from the ACR, kiwi fruit, which is doing also so very well. It's a common fruit now, one of the richest sources of vitamin C. And again, of course, emphasis is being given together, I would say, by both CSIR and CSIR labs on the cultivation of cannabis, for various purposes, for the fiber, and developing high value crops too. Again, the technology which has been developed by the ICR scientists, on molecular breeding. I think that's really very important. And lastly, I would just touch upon in only a few minutes, because we know how important the environmental sustainability has become today, with agriculture producing more and more, and agriculture being one of the sectors which has degraded environment to a larger extent. We all know it, of course, which is required in the sense of both food and feed. But you mentioned about, for example, converting some of these, or developing biodegradable plastics is important. But important again, you mentioned about, it's a very innovative idea of converting these flowers to lutein, and that too, again, both for feed and feed, through self-help women groups from some of these. I think we should realize how important these waste could be converted to wealth, and also at the same time provides us clean atmosphere. And one of the innovations which the country is looking forward to, again, from CSIR lab, is the current problem we are witnessing today, is this stubble burning or the paddy straw burning. I have traveled last night, actually, I was in Haryana, in my hometown, and Haryana being one of the nearest neighbors of Delhi, we know how important it is. I've seen fields and fields, large tracts being burned, day or night, and certainly causing pollution. I think so together, both CSIR and ICR, I think the biggest innovation which our Honorable Prime Minister would also like, and even for young children, women, or old people of this country, particularly Delhi, which is a large population, northern part of it, that we should try to find an innovative solution with that. And of course, coming to your last slide, which was certainly very, very innovative, you've thrown up some wonderful challenges and innovative ideas to talk about it. And I'm sure certainly these ideas we must all together practice, ultimately to meet the challenges of Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations 2030. We all party to it as India, and I think we have a big role to play at the global level with both CSIR and ICR together to really identify some kind of nature-based solutions. As you mentioned, some of those challenges you listed in your slide, it's very, very important. And at the same time, I'm sure you, being one of the, again, very well-known policymakers in the country, along with our Dr. Mahapatra, the Director General and Secretary there, together, and many other group of secretaries, I think we're looking forward to some kind of innovative solutions, together, really speaking, which are nature-based, which are, when we talk about the country for the environmental sustainability, plant-based diets, in a way, we need to really promote more and more. To me, it appears, I think it's so very important. And you have thrown up some of the excellent ideas. And I would, being the secretary, along with the former president, of course, the current chairman, Dr. Gautam, Dr. P.K. Joshi, and Dr. Anil Kumar Singh, the current Vice President, and our Honorable President, we would like to organize some, actually speaking, some roundtable discussions or brainstorming sessions together with CSIR on some of the wonderful areas you have identified. And as historically you have mentioned that we have come up a long way, right from 1950s onwards, for example. Even before that, you mentioned the 19th century kind of role CSIR has been playing even before ICR was established, or before we witnessed even the evolution. So I think we must try to, sir, this is, of course, after listening to you, I'm myself excited, to contribute to whatever little way in organizing some of these discussions together, and not only just talking about it, but finding solutions and implementable action points, if we can develop together, will be certainly a long way that your lecture would take us as a country, forward, in the area of agriculture and energy together. With this, and of course, the government and as a policymakers, we have a big role to play, allowing new technologies, for example, genome editing, or having a positive, friendly environment with regard to regulatory framework, which is competitive or which is in harmony with the rest of the world, globally speaking, I think are also a very important role, we have to play together, and National Academy is certainly tuned to take up all these policy discussions forward, with your support, and your lecture would certainly, give us more, I'm sure, food for thought for others to look into it. And with this, I'm very happy again, and thank you very much profusely, Dr. Mande, to listen to you profusely. I know I've gone through your CV, you've made excellent contributions, but here is another chapter we will be adding to your own contribution together with ICR, to make this country, take it forward, both economically and environmentally from agriculture point of view. With this, I request the Honorable Chair of the session, Dr. P.L. Gautam, who himself is a stalwart when we talk about the agriculture, who had been a Vice Chancellor of more than 2 universities, who has been a chairperson of more than 2 authorities, who has been the Deputy Director General of Crop Sciences in the Indian Council of Agricultural Research. He's one person who has wore, I think, maximum number of hats while he was serving, and he's been an excellent plant breeder and genetic scientist. So we have got certainly more to learn from him, and look forward to his, concluding remarks. We request you, Dr. Gautam, for your concluding remarks. And thanks again, Dr. Mande Saab. Over to you, Dr. Gautam.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bansal, for a nice summary of the presentation. Dr. Mande, this was a very, very long presentation, which you synthesized in a very short time. And the mention about the innovations and technologies, both in agriculture and energy sectors, which have now a great scope to help the country in solving many problems. Dr. Bansal did a good survey of what important things you have indicated amongst the technologies and innovations. I would not like to make repetition on that, but certainly the last slide which you presented was very comprehensive and conveys a lot of messages to the gathering here. And as you said, this is one of the largest gathering of agriculture scientists. And I think there are messages from this particular presentation in the end. You have rightly indicated that diversification in agriculture and agriculture products will be a very important factor in ensuring sustainability in agriculture. You mentioned about water. Yes, a very critical area. And that is where the all sustainability pillars will be supported. And I think that is one area where our scientists are working to increase the water use efficiency and also try to help in stopping the alarming depletion of the water tables. You mentioned about the post-harvest management, very important area, and particularly reducing the wastages. In fact, your most of the presentation had been talking about the reducing wastages, the taking care of the crop residues and so on. And that is a very important area to be pursued with all sincerity by the scientists. Mention about the circular economy was well received and well taken by the people, and I think there is a lot of scope for us to work further. This will require certainly ICR and CSIR have technologies, and there is need for more technologies. But at the same time, the regulatory framework has to be very conducive to take those technologies further. Well, there is a big message for the assembly here that we should try to look into the exploitation of the emerging technology in agriculture and energy, and try to really capitalize on the whatever technologies we have, make the pilots, have the startups, and link it with industry, and bring win-win situation to the farmers and the entire country. NAS has important role which it is doing through bringing the different policy papers, and I think this is a need for our scientists to look into this part, that how can we really contribute in sustainable practices. There is a global concern. The mention was made about the Glasgow COP26. Many concerns, many areas. What we can contribute in that. One example of coal was indicated, that substitute to coal. That is, these are the technologies, emerging technologies for solving the problem of energy and so on. It is so interesting presentation, and hopefully the listeners, the participants have enjoyed the entire presentation, and it is for us to really make a solid recommendation for working towards sustainable practices, promoting their the use, and also promoting the needed policies wherever required. We have exceeded the time, and I thank Dr. Mande for taking his time from the busy schedule and address the gathering. And I thank Dr. Bansal for ably supporting me in summarizing the very exhaustive and very interesting presentation. Thank Dr. Joshi for giving the stage management role, and thank the NAS and the organizing committee for giving us the opportunity to chair this session. I would also like to join Dr. Mande in congratulating the new VC of the PHU, the host institution for this Congress. I wish him a very exciting experience in this great institution of the country. With this, I'd like to stop here. Thank you all very much for the patient listening and participation. Thank you very much. Let's give him a big hand for this nice presentation.
Thank you very much. I thank profusely to Dr. Mande for giving a very outstanding plenary lecture. It was a brilliant lecture with lots of information for agricultural scientists particularly. And we are very happy that CSIR and ICR are jointly working in various areas. And you have given very, very interesting examples. Especially, I was very much impressed with India-centric and India-based innovations. And I think this should be our philosophy, that how we can develop India-centric and India-based innovations. And this is a befitting response of our Prime Minister's offer for local for global and vocal for local. I think this is very, very important that we promote those commodities which are grown locally and have very high value at a global level. And also the waste management, very interesting example of offered flowers. Only research can be done in India. So you have taken it. These issues are very, very interesting, and you have very well connected science, technology, and innovations for economic, social, and environmental benefits. We profusely thank you, sir, on behalf of all the participants, on behalf of organizers, for accepting our request and delivering excellent presentations. I request all the audience here to give a big hand to Professor Mande. I'm